If you gathered a bunch of historians, religious or not, they would agree that there once walked a man named Jesus, a real guy. He lived in Galilee, was killed by Romans, and his followers carried on after his death. But 2,000 plus years later, those are the only facts they could all agree on. But for a person as consequential as Jesus, how do we fill in the rest? And what does that picture say about ourselves? So prepare yourself for some serious questions and some not so serious questions, like which account would Jesus definitely follow?
Maybe S'mores, the photogenic cat.
My name is Javi Zubizarreta, and welcome to Jesus' Favorite Podcast, a show where we explore the many ways we can understand one of the most important figures in history. Like anyone over the age of 30, I can find TikTok to be a strange, confusing, but ultimately delightful place. Animal videos live alongside artists and would-be comedians. You can really find anything on the app. But how does an unassuming nun go viral on TikTok, racking up millions of views and ultimately winding up on the Kelly Clarkson show? What does it take to be a viral sensation? We sat down with Sister Monica Clare to find out. Sister Monica Clare, thank you so much for joining us today on Jesus' Favorite Podcast.
Thank you. I'm glad this podcast exists.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah. We are too. In doing a little bit of research on you, I understand you had a life before joining the convent. You were in Hollywood. You were at parties with celebrities. Sounds like quite the life. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, I'm a lot older than I look. When I tell people I worked in motion picture advertising for 20 years, it's very nice to see how shocked they are because they don't realize I'm 57 years old.
You would not notice that, yeah.
Yeah. Of course, I started out as a child wanting to be a nun, but then nobody was interested in me doing that. So I had to come up with all these other life paths that would sort of please the people around me. And when I was in high school, I started getting into theater, and I was really, really pathologically shy. So I started doing theater. So I went to NYU and majored in acting and got a degree in acting. And the family that I was working for when I was in college, the dad worked in advertising. So I got introduced in the world of advertising by listening to him. He was the president of Revlon Advertising at that time.
Yeah.
And then after college, they were going to move to Los Angeles because he got a job as the head of marketing at Paramount Pictures.
Oh, wow.
So they asked me to go with them because I was attached to the kids. They were attached to me. He said, I know you want to be an actor, so maybe you can get up to LA and whatever. And within a very short period of time, I realized I was not cut out to be an actor. So when I was leaving my nanny job, I said, I'm going to get a secretary job or something, try to find a grown-up job. And he spoke to one of his friends who owned an ad agency and got me a job as a secretary at an ad agency. So that's where it started.
Oh, wow.
I worked for what they call boutique agencies, which are these small agencies in Hollywood that specialize in movies, television, video games. At first, I worked in AV and trailers and TV commercials, and then I switched to print and became a photo editor. And by the end of my career, I was a senior photo editor. I was running a department.
Wow.
We did photo shoots. And the whole time I was doing it for 20 years, I was a fish out of water. I was the least likely person to go into advertising. It's a business of extroverts.
Sure.
I'm an introvert. It's high energy. It's high drama. I learned a lot creatively from it. So it was valuable.
Sure. What was your experience of Hollywood sort of as a culture at that time?
When I first went out there, we took a tour of Universal Studios, and the tour guide says the same thing pretty much every time. He says, we're driving through this Western cowboy town, but these are facades. These are false fronts. The buildings have nothing behind them. And that was what I always carried with me through Hollywood, is that it is a false front. It's like the Wizard of Oz, and there's just a little tiny guy who's running the whole thing. It's really not what the world thinks it is. First, I used to love movies, and then I lost my love of movies because before human resources really started stepping in, there was a lot of of employee abuse. And it really just took all the love of movies and movie making completely out of my heart, because I thought, I'm part of a problem. I'm not part of the solution to what's hurting in the world. Towards the end of my career, I felt like I was in a prison, and my plan to join a convent was me making an escape from the prison.
Wow, wow, wow. So you mentioned something
Mhm.
in talking about your childhood that I find really interesting. You said that you wanted to be a nun at a young age, but people said discourage you from that.
Yeah, yeah.
Where did that desire first come from, and where did that discouragement come from?
I think a lot of real callings from God tapping you on the shoulder, really comes out of left field. That's
Mm,
characteristic of a lot of call stories that I've heard. Not all of them, but a lot of
mhm,
them. For me, it really did come out of left field. I was born in Georgia.
mhm,
I was part of a culture that was very Southern Baptist or Methodist. And there was a real anti Roman Catholic sentiment in the South at that time. I don't know if there still is, but when I was a little girl, I started watching syndicated things on television like The Flying Nun. Boy, was that good marketing for convents.
yeah.
That show. It was a really great show. It was really funny, and I saw the joy of sisterhood. And strangely enough, it was Hollywood that brought me to my calling, because I
Wow.
watched The Nun Story, which was made in 1959. It was on the Sunday matinee on TV,
Mhm.
and other films and books about nuns. I was always drawn to that sort of thing. And if I ever talked to anybody about it, they would be like, no, absolutely not. The Reformation was raging in
Sure.
Georgia at that time. And I
Yeah.
was always attracted to the Catholic devotional practices. And then
Mm,
as I got older, especially when I was a teenager, people said, it's psychologically unhealthy to want to join a convent, because you're running away from the world, you're suppressing your feminine energy. So I had to fight back against a lot of that. But I had one
yeah.
friend in high school, Warren, who's still my friend to this
Mhm.
day. His nieces went to the Catholic school in my hometown. So he asked me if I wanted to chaperone dances and go on field trips with the kids. It was the first time I ever met nuns. They were the
Yeah.
Daughters of Charity from Catonsville, Maryland. They were running that school.
Mm.
They were so full of joy, and they were funny, and they had these short habits, these little clip-on veils that were so great. Loved them. They were young and
Yeah.
they were so down to earth. And I thought, that is the woman I want to be. I want to be
Mm.
like those Daughters of Charity.
Well, we will come back to that, but first, I've got some rapid fire questions here to sort of spark the imagination and conversation around Jesus. So, if
Sure.
you're ready,
Yep.
if Jesus had a favorite ice cream flavor, what would it be?
Something that has a lot of ingredients.
Okay,
Something that
okay.
was pulled from different sources.
If Jesus had a favorite movie, what would it be?
The Nun Story, because that's my favorite movie.
If Jesus had a favorite season of the year, what would it be?
Oh, definitely Easter.
Okay. Would Jesus be a dog person, a cat person, or a plant person?
I think he'd be an everything person. He wouldn't have to pick
Okay.
one.
If Jesus came to your house or to the convent rather, what would you offer him to drink?
First, I'd offer him a cup of tea, because our community was founded in England. So we always immediately offer people a cup of tea.
Okay. If Jesus had a favorite sports team, what would it be?
The Saints.
Would Jesus be an Apple or Android user?
I think it would be an Android user, because it's much more logical.
And then finally for this round, in one word, who is Jesus to you?
Love.
You were talking about sort of your first experience of meeting sisters in real life. You
Mhm.
had this sort of call to something more mystical, more structured. But where did Jesus first introduce himself to you? Where did you first sort of encounter this person, this idea?
It was in church, as a little Southern Baptist girl in the 70s. The image of Jesus was your hippie cousin, you know, long hair and sandals. He was the cool hippie cousin. who
Mm,
wanted to hang out with you and be your friend, and you could just talk to him all day long. And that was a good way to be introduced to Jesus in a really
sure.
personal way. I've carried that even through, the different denominations that I've belonged to. Jesus is still my hippie cousin. He's just so great.
Uh, so how did that manifest for you as your hippie cousin buddy?
I think sometimes as a kid, because I was so shy and because I was in a family of extroverts, so I was the odd man out. Everybody talked and I didn't get to talk much.
Mm,
Jesus was the one that I could talk to. That persists to this day as well. Whatever I'm going through, I feel like he's always there. I've never felt loneliness in my whole life. And as a kid, it was nice to know that Jesus was always with me.
yeah. Was there a specific story of Jesus's time on this earth that resonated with you in particular?
I think it's all the times when he hangs out with the sinners and the outcasts that really resonates with me because I've always been an oddball ever since I was a kid. I'm one of those people that no matter which group I tried to fit into, I didn't. And
Mm,
until I came to the convent, I was like, finally found my people.
yeah,
But for Jesus to be so welcoming and affirming to everybody has always
yeah.
appealed to me.
So let's fast forward back to you're in Hollywood. It's a rough go. Uh, I can only imagine too heading a department with Photoshop where you're editing the reel.
Yeah.
um, what finally pushed you out and sent you on this journey towards the convent life?
I think at one point I had tried so hard to be normal. I had this career that, people back in my hometown thought was so great. My parents thought it was so
Hmm.
glamorous. And I had gotten married and divorced, and none of it was fulfilling. I was really depressed. I was really anxious. And I got into
Hmm.
therapy. And it was in therapy that my therapist taught me to speak my truth, to be
Hmm.
authentic. And my therapist was a secular Jewish lady,
Yeah.
very funny, really smart. And I said, well, do you think all this other stuff isn't working out for me because I'm being called to be a sister, like instead of being married? She goes,
Yeah.
no, no, that's not it. But she had taught me to push back. So I said, I
Yeah.
think it is. I think you're wrong. And that was when I started finally sort of coming out of my shell and being more authentic to my family and my friends. There were a lot of my
Mm,
friends who didn't even know that I went to church. So I took the risk finally of coming out of the closet as a church person. And
yeah.
I didn't proselytize. I just, would quietly say that I had a church thing to go to, or, oh, that's near my church. And so people became more aware. But it was just
Mm,
this crisis in my life where I said, all right, folks, I tried everything that I was supposed to do to be happy. I did the checklist
mm,
and I'm not happy. I'm absolutely miserable. I had gone from, you know, dysfunctional, abusive, toxic environments in every job I had in advertising. The last job I had was very stressful, very high energy job, but it was a good job. Should I stick with this? Because it's the best thing I've ever had.
sure.
And I just kept noticing the misogyny in the movies, the misogyny in the way that the art directors did photo shoots. There was a lot of violence against women. There was a lot of criticism of the models that we used for the shoot. They were always saying they were fat or they weren't quite right. And I
Mm,
thought, this is what creates insecurity and danger in women.
mm.
And all the violence, every time we did a shoot, they would say, we need more guns because we had these fake guns that we would rent.
Sure.
We rented we bought airsoft guns that looked like the real thing and
Yeah.
just take the orange tip off of it. But
Yeah.
the last campaign that I worked on was Dark Knight Rising. I think was the name of that Batman
Sure.
franchise. And for every shoot, they wanted dozens and dozens of guns, automatic weapons, everything, and more blood. We had to get gallons of fake blood and guns. And I thought, wow, God is really trying to tell me something. And I
Yeah.
left Los Angeles. I think it was shortly after I left Los Angeles that boy walked into a movie theater
Sure. Yeah.
and shot
In
people.
Aurora. Yeah.
Yeah. And I thought, I was a part of that. I was a part of that industry that glorifies violence. And
Mm,
I am not happy that I've spent so much time in it. But that was the other thing that really pushed me was being aware of being part of the problem.
Yeah. Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
So you were stepping out of the closet,
Hmm.
attending church, sort of being your authentic self. What were you finding as you stepped more into who you were called to be?
Church always felt like home. It brought back good memories of when I was a little kid and went to church with my
Hmm.
grandmother, and it was a pleasant experience to worship and sing. The music really drew me in. So I tried out a few different denominations, and I was emailing Roman Catholic nuns when I was married, and I said,
Hmm.
I'm really feeling called to be a nun. I'm married, and they told me it was supposed to make me happy, and I'm miserable because I don't feel called to be to
Yeah.
marriage.
Yeah.
And it was a Roman Catholic nun that said to me, "You sound like an Episcopalian with my political beliefs
Sure.
and my worldview." And so that's when she told me that, I said, "Well, it's too bad that they don't have nuns." She said, "Oh, yes, they do." So it was that day.
Oh wow.
That day, I emailed the Episcopal rector in Beverly Hills because I was working in PR in Beverly Hills at the
Hmm.
time. And I said, "I want to be an Episcopalian and I want to be a nun." Luckily, she didn't think I was totally nuts. But
Yeah. That's
she took,
incredible.
yeah, she took me under her wing and she really helped me with my discernment.
Yeah. Yeah. What does that discernment look like? I'm sure some would assume that any religious order would just be happy to just say, "Come on in, we need more of you. We're running low on numbers here."
Running
But what does
low.
that discernment look like?
It was a lot longer than I thought. I thought,
Yeah.
I was ready to join in
Mhm.
1999, and they said,
Mm.
"You got to be out of debt." And I had a lot of debt because college, and then I
Sure.
paid for my sister's education. So I had all this debt, and I thought, well, that's impossible. I'll never get out of debt. So it took me like a good 12 years to get out of debt,
Wow.
and I had to stay in this prison of advertising for 12 years.
Yeah.
But, of course, it's all on God's time and it all makes sense in God's world because during those years, I developed more management skills, more
Mm.
creative skills, marketing skills that are relevant to my work today. And I was able to visit 4 different convents and really discern where I felt at home. Then I went to St. Margaret's in Boston and I loved them. This is it. I am
Mm.
joining them. And after I went to their search program, I emailed their superior and I said, "Hey, I'm ready to join." I got to get
Yeah.
out of debt, but I'm ready to join.
Yeah.
She never emailed me back. And then I emailed other emails at the convent there. Nobody emailed me back. I
Oh, no.
called, I left voicemails, nothing. And I thought, well, God's really trying to tell me something with these people. They hate me. They
Oh,
don't want
no.
me. So
Yeah.
then I emailed the Community of St. John Baptist after I gave up on St. Margaret's. And within 15 minutes, the superior
Mm.
emailed me back. She
Mm.
said, "Of course, I remember you. You were here 8 years ago and you came to our search program and you're from California." And so I
Wow.
thought, that's really God telling
Yeah.
me where I
Yeah.
need to be.
Fast forwarding a little bit, you become a
Mhm.
sister, you're in life. What have you found in this in today's
Mhm.
world pretty radical form of living?
I found that it's a lot better than I thought it was going to be. My work is preaching, teaching, leading retreats,
Mhm.
um, spreading the gospel. I thought all the work that I had done in the world would be taken away from me because that was the old fashioned
Mm.
way of being. And they said, "No, you can still do that. You can bring your laptop." you know.
Yeah.
And so I was pleasantly surprised at how great it feels to be a sister. It's still a challenge because living together is the hardest thing on earth
Sure.
when you've got a bunch of people who would not have chosen each other
Mm.
out there in the secular world. We're all forced to live together 24/7. We're both active and contemplative, which means that we pray 5 divine offices a day. We have daily mass. So we're in chapel about 3 hours a day.
Wow.
So we're on top of each other
Yeah.
every day. And so we get on each other's nerves. There's conflict, there's all kinds of things. But I was
Yeah.
pleasantly surprised to find that even when these people get mad at me when we have conflicts, they still love me. They don't
Mm.
reject me. They don't abandon me, which is really different for me. It feels like
Yeah.
a real love, a real emotional intimacy that I did not expect. I thought we would be like co-workers, but instead we're to a place where we're authentic with each other to say, you're really getting on my nerves today. And we can be honest with each other instead of being this coworker nice front all the time.
Sure. Yeah.
It's great.
We're going to get more into your TikTok here in a moment, but on one of your TikToks, you were talking about what it was to join religious life and being able to take off certain masks as a way of thinking about it. Could you tell us a little bit about what that was to leave the world of Hollywood, where, as you say, it was, image and violence and celebrity and all the things that make Hollywood good, bad, otherwise.
Yeah.
What it was like to then take on a habit, live in this, 3 hours in chapel and so forth.
I just remember having this huge sigh of relief when I was finally accepted in the community, and I didn't have to play that game anymore. There's a game that males and females are supposed to play out there in the world. We're supposed to portray a certain construct of what our gender is supposed to be. And that never felt comfortable for me. I hated it. I thought, why can't I just be, why can't I just look like I want to look instead of looking in a way that other people want me to look? And even now, we can wear regular clothes, what we call people clothes. We can wear it on our day off, which is Monday, and we can wear regular clothes on our vacations. And I don't, because I never felt comfortable in those clothes. I always felt like people were judging me, saying I was too fat, or that's not fashionable, or, people can be so critical. And especially when I was in Hollywood, everybody was toned and thin. Right. And I didn't. I was always this weird sort of little, Wednesday Addams kind of person. I kept my hair long because I'm pathologically cheap and I don't want to pay to get my hair cut. I could just cut it myself. I think I was just really rebelling against the idea that women have to pay so much money to look acceptable. That really bothered me. And I know in my heart that advertising is what drives that. It causes women to feel insecure. And so you spend money so that you won't be insecure. And I was part of that cycle.
It is a scary thing when you're that close to the creation of culture or pop culture or mass media, to realize like, oh, wow, I'm sitting in a room where people are discussing someone's size, height, weight to say whether or not they're right for this. It's incredible judgment. And yet, we take it as just sort of, that's just how it is. That's the world, and not choices made by people in some room.
I thought, if I have all this background in advertising, I'd rather be advertising something I really believe in that's really going to help people. God.
Is that where the TikTok started?
I was kind of dragged into TikTok because
I think anyone over the age of 30 is dragged onto TikTok.
I was like, that's for little kids.
Yeah.
And when I first came into the convent, the sisters were very opposed to social media.
Sure.
They thought it was pure evil and that somebody was going to steal our credit cards and see us in our pajamas and break into the house. Yeah. Like some of them still think that, but it took a lot of convincing for me to tell them, no, it can be used to evangelize. It can be used to spread the gospel. So they let me start putting stuff on Facebook, and they've seen the wonderful example of Roman Catholic sisters and brothers who were really pioneers in that work of spreading the gospel on social media. And so when I got into Facebook and I thought Instagram, that's as far as I'm going to go. I'm too old. I'm not going to learn anything else. But then my friend from LA, who used to be my photo assistant, he kept calling me and leaving me messages. He goes, have you seen TikTok? And I'm like, I don't want to go on there. That's just a bunch of foolishness and dancing. I don't dance. He said, no, there's some great stuff on there. There's archaeologists, there's therapists. And I said, really? And he said, there's cat videos. So that was really the gateway drug for me. And so I saw these hilarious animal videos. And at the time, we had this wild turkey that was attacking the convent. She was terrorizing the convent. Like we started out going, oh, there's a pretty little turkey. And then she was like standing on top of the car and wouldn't get off and was attacking us. We were trying to drive. She would, like, if you're backing out of the parking space, she would stand behind the car and menace us.
Word.
And she was humongous. So I started making videos about her. And we still don't know if it was a her. We just assumed.
Sure.
And that's where I started, was just making those kind of videos, and the cat. And when the turkey videos started getting popular, I thought, well, now that I have people's attention, I'm going to educate them.
Before we dive fully into your life in TikTok, I got another round of rapid fire questions for you.
Okay.
All right. If Jesus did a TikTok challenge, which one would it be?
I think he would ask, what is love?
Okay. What trending sound would Jesus use the most?
Spirit in the Sky by Norman Greenbaum.
Okay. All right. Would Jesus be on social media at all?
Oh, yeah. He would be out there preaching and teaching like he always did.
What would Jesus' social media following look like today?
I think he would be horrified at some of it. And he would be glad for the small percentage of true believers.
What would Jesus' social media handle be?
Your buddy.
Your buddy. All right. And then this is a three-parter. Which 3 accounts would Jesus definitely follow?
James Martin.
Okay.
I would hope that he would follow mine.
Okay.
Let's say that.
That's fair. That's fair.
On the third one, maybe S'mores, the photogenic cat.
So the evil turkey that's terrorizing you all starts to go viral.
Mm-hmm.
When did you start putting yourself on camera to say, let's talk about Jesus, TikTok?
Well, I was so scared to do it.
Yeah.
I asked my therapist, do you think I should do this? She goes, sure, why not? And I said, I don't want to be weird because, you know, some people are really opposed to religion and they would think I was being weird. So I just did a one video where I was very wooden and very not okay on camera, reading off a paper, you know.
Sure.
My purpose was to inform people that there are nuns and monks in the Episcopal Church.
Sure.
And give a little bit of background. And I was shocked that people were responding so positively. And then I put up a video of me singing a hymn in Gregorian chant. And I thought, nobody but like 6 church nerds are going to care about this. Nobody cares about this.
Yeah.
And that video got over 1.5 million views.
Wow.
And then I started doing informational videos just about, hey, here's what nuns and monks do all day. And here's our schedule. Yeah. And all these women started commenting, I can't believe at the time I was 55 years old. Can't believe you're 55 years old. How do you stay so young looking? Drop your skincare routine. I was like, of all people, I do not have a skincare routine, nor have I ever. Yeah. I did a video addressing it just to be funny. And that went really super viral. It got me in all the online news outlets. Yeah. People were, you know, wanting to license the video. And I was like, this stupid little video. That's what got me on Kelly Clarkson and got so much media attention. I was like, wow, God, you really do have a sense of humor.
Oh my gosh. That's pretty wild to think, as a journey, going from the world of advertising and photoshopping and all of that. A sense of humor indeed. I think one of the things we were most interested in talking to you about was that simple fact that you do talk about your religious life, daily life, but also faith and Jesus and more on the internet. Mm-hmm. And that's not an easy thing to do for anybody. We've seen it go wrong in many ways. We've seen it become a weapon in many ways. And it's, you know, what we do at Grotto, or try to do, is, you know, talk about it in ways that feel approachable. How did you start to say, okay, if I'm going to do this, you know, Kelly Clarkson had me on, now what? How did you start to think of how would you talk about Jesus, the faith in your life?
I started posting in the depths of the pandemic. We had closed down our retreat house. We had no guests here. We couldn't go out preaching and teaching. All the churches were closed. So I felt like people need what they need when they go to church, which is comfort. They need guidance. They need not answers, but they need a way to find their own answers. And
Hmm.
I had a lot of inquiries in the comments about why would a loving God allow this in the world? So I thought, this is what people need. They need to know how to struggle with these spiritual questions of theirs in a safe environment where I'm not going to say, "Oh, you're going to hell for thinking that,"
Yeah.
because that's what
Yeah.
a lot of people are told. They can't question, they can't struggle, they can't bring their authentic self to God. You have to, fit into this certain like pigeonhole. So I wanted to create a safe space for people to ask the hard questions and to teach them how to pray, because I'm also a spiritual director. And the shocking thing
Hmm.
to me was when people come to me for spiritual direction, they don't know how to pray. If you do it with the intention of connecting with God, anything you do, making music, walking in nature, creating a piece of art is prayer.
Hmm.
And so I'm hoping to teach people how they can connect with God and to reassure them that I don't judge them if they don't go to church. I don't
Yeah.
blame them because I have to address the religious trauma that's out there
Sure.
and say, yeah, that happened. And I'm really sorry that that happened to you.
Yeah.
And to get rid of their stereotypes about religion.
One of the TikToks of yours that I saw that was just on that topic
Mm-hmm,
of how do we understand the Bible? How do we read the Bible?
mm-hmm,
And you talked about how reading it as a literal document, as a
mm-hmm.
everything in here was meant to be read as it is, no interpretation. That's a fairly recent thing, and
Yeah.
I'm curious if you could tell us a little bit about that.
I think there's value in having your own personal relationship with Scripture, but of course, in our tradition and in the Roman Catholic tradition, there's also scholarly ways of looking at Scripture. Their historical context, even putting it in the context of an experience of like an oppressed people. You have to bring
Mhm.
all those things to bear, or else you truly can't understand it. And to take it literally is not what the writers of Scripture ever meant. It was written as a religious text, and in many cases it's allegorical. The parables are obviously made up imaginary stories to illustrate a point. It
Mhm.
was never meant to be a scientific historical document ever. And I think people are shocked to learn that a lot of mainline religions, the big ones, aren't fundamentalists, because
Right.
what they hear in the media is fundamentalism. That's a small part of the belief
Yeah.
system.
Yeah. So how are you breaking that down, or just how are you opening up
Mhm.
faith to people on TikTok?
I think I'm trying as much as I can to share books with them, to say, like, when somebody was asking me how can God allow evil
Yeah.
to exist, I said there's a whole branch of theology called theodicy, and here are a bunch of books on that topic. And theologians have talked about this in a much more intelligent way than I ever could. So I invite you to explore that yourself. A lot of people have never been introduced to theologians, like
Sure.
historical theology. Like, they don't realize that tradition is a really big part of understanding Scripture and understanding our faith. So it's nice to be able to introduce people to a book about the concept of hell or the concept of heaven, and to say, nobody has the answers, but theologians help you think about what your answer might be if you were to come up with an answer.
Yeah. It's a really great way of putting it.
Thank you.
Um, TikTok, obviously, it's predominantly young people.
Hmm.
And as we know, generational studies, young people today are more disconnected from their faith, from religious communities, from religious orders.
Yeah.
What are they sort of discovering with you? What's the feedback like with your followers?
It's so encouraging because the younger people give me so much hope for humanity. They were raised with a sense that the world is in crisis and they need
Mhm.
to pitch in and help. That's how their worldview is. It's on the greater good. in schools these days, part of your curriculum is you have to do volunteer hours. So they're service oriented, and they also don't want anything that's fake. They are searching for authenticity, and that's why they've rejected religion, because they really feel that religion is not authentic. If they're going to have an experience of something spiritual, they don't want stuff getting in the way. So I have this great hope that they can burn down what's there and build it back up in an authentic way, because they are different from my generation. I'm Gen X. We were raised to, you got to be a doctor, you got to be a lawyer, you got to make a lot of money, you got to get your own pad and focus on yourself. And their generation is raised in a more collective way. Like a lot of young people that I know are living in a group situation because they don't want to live alone. And also the economy is so bad.
Can't.
But yeah, they prefer to live in these communal situations, much like a convent. And they're seeking connection and experience in a very real way, which is so encouraging. That they're not tuning out reality anymore. They're trying to live into it.
There's an irony here almost of someone who wears the same outfit every day, wears a habit, lives in a very intentional way, has stricter schedule than most, but you're telling them that there's a freedom in all of this. How do you explain that, or how do you break that down?
The freedom is rejecting all the constructs of gender, of financial reality, of you've got to do this in order to be happy. The structure of the community actually is freeing, because I'm not working 9 to 5. I'm not working in a factory. I'm going back and forth between prayer and work all day long. And that feels more like a natural state of being to me. And it wouldn't to everybody. And also living a life of meaning and service is I think, more appealing to the younger generations than it would ever be to Gen X and boomers. But I think a lot of people back then entered for the wrong reasons. They entered because they were trying to escape their sexual orientation. They entered because, as women, that was the only way to get an education and travel and have what looked like a career. And a lot of them left. There was this huge exodus from the religious orders, because I believe in my heart it was because people had entered for the wrong reasons.
Sure.
And I think that the younger ones that are entering now, like the sisters in Ann Arbor, Michigan, I'm just so inspired by them, because they've really got it right. They're saying all these young people are joining the community. The average age is like 33, because they're saying this life is wonderful. It's amazing. It's what you need in order to feel like you have a life that has meaning.
Yeah. What has TikTok shown you about Jesus from your time on it?
It's really inspired me, because I never in a million years thought that non-religious, non-spiritual people would come together and form community around an account like mine. I have all these followers who regularly have conversations in the comments. And this woman wrote to me yesterday, and I was just like in tears. So I hope I can get through this.
Sure.
She says, I finally got the nerve to take my trans lesbian daughter and her fiance to our Episcopal church in my little town. The bishop happened to be there today. His sermon was about how Black lives matter, and then all lives matter, because Black lives, women's lives, Pakistani lives, Indigenous, Jewish, LGBTQ, gay, lesbians, trans should matter as much as white lives. I cried like a baby. I mean, what are the chances that I followed you for so long to finally go on a day, not only when the bishop was there, but his sermon was so guided to my family. And as much as I cried, it was nothing compared to my atheist daughter. I give you all the credit for us being there and giving the Episcopal religion a chance. Thanks so much. I get messages like that all the time, where people say, I walked into church because of you. Not always Episcopal churches, but they'll say, I finally decided to try and find a religion that works for me, because I didn't realize I could until you started talking about the different denominations and how if the church that you grew up in doesn't work for you, you can find one that does.
What's your advice for someone like that who Maybe they feel that itch,
Mm-hmm.
that sort of question gnawing at them that maybe there's something missing, there's something else.
Mm-hmm.
How do you start that journey back to faith, back to church, back to God, Jesus?
I've encouraged people to try and find a church that's safe for them. A lot of people are terrified to walk into a church in person. So you can dip your toe in by watching worship, listening to sermons online, and looking up the denomination and see if that aligns with your beliefs. And if it doesn't, keep looking. Even if you have to start attending church all the way across the United States on Zoom or on YouTube or whatever, and connect with it that way to find the right church for you. It's just so important to find the right fit. So I tell them it's just like anything else. You have to find out your church, what works for you.
Yeah. On the flip side of that, let me ask you, because I know, working at a Catholic institution, I sometimes hear criticism of what you just described as like church shopping, right?
Church shopping, yeah.
But how do you encourage someone to find their truth and the truth?
Yeah. I think, just to look deep within and see what you've been taught about God, what you think about God, as opposed to what you think God should be. And see if you can find anything that aligns with the way that you interpret God. And I always encourage church shopping because I did it. I tried out several denominations. So it helps people to know that, you don't have to commit right away. You just have to see what's going on in there.
Sure.
So it's like any relationship. You have to really explore it and protect yourself.
Mm-hmm. In that letter that you read, someone who, for many reasons, probably felt like they weren't welcomed in church. What's your advice for folks who have felt unwelcomed or not wanted in religious spaces if they do feel some calling to the spiritual life?
I think that, and not just because I live in a convent, but convents and monasteries are a good sort of under the radar way to connect with God and attend worship without having to sign on the dotted line. We have a lot of people who sort of orbit around us of different denominations, different phases in their spiritual journey, and we don't ask for a commitment from them. We don't say, "Hey, you want to be a nun?" We have people who come to our Sunday worship, and they come for years and years, and then they sort of fade away and go, find themselves a church to go to. But it's a good way of encountering worship and prayer and God without the intimidating parts of it. I think that people are rightfully afraid of religion. Unfortunately, religion has done a lot to scare people off. We have issues of intimidation and fear in our past, which we have to answer to and say, we want to help people grow close to God without the fear of being abused or rejected. Coming into God's house and being rejected is never what Jesus would have wanted.
All right. I got a final set of rapid fire questions here for you. All right. If you could ask Jesus one question, what would it be?
What's up with this free will business? That was a terrible idea.
Be easier if we did have to figure it out. If Jesus were to look at you, how would you describe his look?
Unconditional love beyond comprehension.
Where is Jesus most real for you?
In music, sacred music.
What is Jesus's key message for social media?
Spread the good news, not the bad news.
And finally, if Jesus had a favorite podcast, what would it be?
This one. Definitely.
Oh, gosh. Sister, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. This has been a fantastic conversation. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you for your kindness and for having me on.
If you want to find out more about Sister Monica Clare, you can follow her on TikTok at Nonsense for the People. You can also learn more about her convent at csjb.org.
This episode of Jesus' Favorite Podcast was hosted by Javi Zubizarreta and produced by me, Ebony Moxie. Senior producer, Josh Long. Grotto Network is Adrian Garaldi, Social Media Manager. Becky Rogers, Art Director. Kara Kenujeski, Project Manager. Ebony Moxie, Audio Storytelling Associate. Jackie Cho, Platform Storytelling Associate. Jane O'Connor, Associate Video Producer. Javi Zubizarreta, Director. Jesse McCartney, Senior Content Editor. Josh Long, Senior Video Producer. Kevin DeClute, Video Producer. Michaela Douglas, Digital Content Strategist. Mike Rossetti, Senior Manager for Community Engagement. Father Brendan McClare, Associate Producer. Ryan Brossard, Student Media Assistant. Special thanks to our guests at Notre Dame Studios. Did you like what you heard today? Please share Jesus' Favorite Podcast with a friend. Also, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Instagram at Grotto Network.
My grandmother's like, over my dead body, will you become a Roman Catholic? The Reformation was raging in Georgia at that time.